Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dodgy Punts AFL podcast, episode number 5. We've made it to the whole one hand worth of episodes. That's assuming you have all 5 fingers. I'm Jesse Dart, joined as always by Liam. We're back. We've had 3 rounds for some, 2 rounds for others. Are we starting to get an idea about where we are this season, Liam? Because I've got to say, I certainly am not.
I think we're starting to see a few signs of what we can expect for the rest of the year coming through for most of the teams. I think we know exactly where they're going to be for the most part, but it's a bit weird. I'm not sure if I'm liking all these random buys throughout the start of the season, just scattered around. You know, we've got Gold Coast and we've got the Giants this week without games. It's kind of hard to get a read on everything because it's just so staggered. It's all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that at all, and this is another... We're risky doing an opening round tirade in the first 90 seconds of the show, which should be about the 4th consecutive week that's happened. So we're going to steer away from that. But
Correct.
What I will say is, I think we had some entertaining games of footy during the round, but we also had some pretty crap ones.
Yeah, it was a pretty decent mix this week, and I think having some of the and obviously we'll get to this in detail when we do our recaps of the games, but a lot of massive mismatches in some games. And a lot of interesting tactics along the way, which I think, and we'll talk about this obviously in great detail. But there's one team in particular which I wasn't a huge fan of their tactics this week, and we'll go into that I'm sure once we get there. Not a fan because of what the tactic was, just the implementation of said tactic. But look, anyone who's watched this week of football will know exactly which game I'm talking about, know exactly which team I'm talking about. So, hey. But no, I think it's been an interesting start to the season. Obviously, we've got some front runners already. I think one in particular that's sticking out like a sore thumb, and then everyone else seems to be kind of in the mix. And I say everybody, obviously I don't mean everybody, but everyone from 2 down basically seems to be thereabouts.
I generally agree with that, but that's what we thought was going to happen going in, except just with the swapping of which team was going to be probably king of the castle and which one was going to be the Dirty Rascals. It hasn't quite panned out like the way we thought it might.
Not just yet.
In that regard.
But still early days. We've still got plenty of games to go, but you know what they say. If you
and
lose,
more importantly, plenty of buys and ambiguous fixturing.
Whew, can't wait. That's my favourite. I can't wait for those. Actually, Jesse, do we have those mid-season buys anymore, or have they all been replaced by these? Oh, we still do.
No, you're not getting off that easily, Liam. You have to have mandated rest periods halfway through the season.
Yeah, I mean,
but that will give us a nice grading point for which coaches will be sacked and which coaches will still be in their jobs.
That's right.
I've got to say, there's probably a couple that might be starting to get a little bit jittery,
a little bit sweaty, sweaty under the collar.
The way their seasons have started.
Yes, indeed.
Because there's a couple of teams out there that have potentially underperformed so far that will need to reverse that momentum should their senior coaches wish to remain senior coaches or join the Brendan Bolton scrap heap that is the AFL senior coaching graveyard. Now, we're going to get stuck into some news. Liam, I'm going to look over you for this one because you are our news boy. So extra, read all about it. What do we have coming out of round 2?
Oh, Jesse, just thanks for throwing to me, mate. This is just in. We're going to be talking this week about a couple of returning head-high hits and hit contacts. Max King, obviously one, and the big news was obviously 2-meter Peter putting his shoulder directly through Harry Cunningham's chin and his jaw. And obviously the fallout from those big hits, I think, we thought at the start of the season with the big suspensions handed out, we would probably tend to see some avoidance of these kind of actions. But the 2-meter Peter one in particular has caused, I think, much more of a conversation piece than anything else, because obviously you've got one side who is saying, well, what else is he supposed to do in that action? And then you've got the other side saying, well, this is exactly what we're trying to get out of the game. And he didn't have to do what he did. So my viewpoint on it is looking at the action. His eyes are on the ball for most of it, but his only issue is that he didn't do it. He didn't challenge it. And that's the one thing they're trying to get out of this game. You got to at least challenge for the ball. You look at the Marbiel Troll and Stephen May incident where a similar situation, Troll's charging in and he contests the ball. He broke 3 of Stephen May's ribs in the process, but he challenged the ball. No weeks. A stark contrast to Peter Peter Wright. That's his last name, right? I keep calling him 2 Meter Peter. I don't actually know what his last. It is Wright. Thank you. In both ways. So he kind of looked at it and he kind of charged in and just turned his shoulder in. It was clumsy. I don't think it was malicious, but a lot of hot takes on it. Jesse, what's your take on it?
And I think you've actually highlighted the point that I most want to talk about here. It's the point of intent, because we know what a dirty head-high hit looks like. We don't need to look at Darren Milburn. We need to look as far back as the preseason to know what a dirty head-high hit looks like. To be clear, this isn't that. This wasn't an intent. I don't think, looking at this, much like Maynard with Brayshaw last year, I don't think there's intent here. But there is a result. And with now pressures and rumours swirling around AFL House that they're now trying even more desperately to stamp out concussion-related issues, because the lawsuits are coming and they are coming fast, and they're going to continue to plague this governing body for an extended period of time now. I suspect 2024 may be the year of suspensions for this. Yeah. And what happens beyond that, and this was probably the part that would infuriate fans the most, is that I don't know. It may go back to it next year being, if Wright gets, for argument's sake, 4 weeks, next year he might have gotten 2.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's like when they went absolutely mental over chicken wing tackles for about a year. And now you honestly see one about every game and no one seems to care. No. That's probably what we're going to be faced with here. So any other year, does Wright get more than 2 weeks? I don't think so. It actually reminded me a lot of the hit that got 5 suspended from the Brownlow in 2014 against the Gold Coast. Very clumsy, not necessarily malicious, but the contact's there. So that was 2 weeks at the time. I think this will get more than that.
Yeah.
But honestly, we desperately need some consistency here. And now we're starting to build a pool of precedents with Pal Pepper, with this, with the other preseason incidents. We need to see some consistency. I'm hoping and praying that we will see some consistency for these adjudications going forward.
I think if this isn't 4 weeks, there's going to be a lot of questions asked based on precedent, because I think Power Peppers was very similar. Clumsy, in play, got the head, concussion, 4 weeks. It seems to be, if you follow those steps exactly, it's the same thing, right? So I don't see this being any less than 4 weeks. And obviously, Peter was very apologetic toward Harry after the game. They went and had a chat. He said, "Soz, bro." But unfortunately, like you said, the precedent's there. They have to keep it going, because if they want to stamp this out, it's the only way. It's the only way to do it. And it's interesting because you see people like with the whole, it's kind of like the Maynard thing from last year where people were like, well, what else is he supposed to do? What else is he supposed to do? Well, that's what they're trying to coach the players to be. They're trying to coach the players to be better and think a bit more about that. And obviously, it's really easy to say that as someone who does not play any sport because of body issues. For me to be here, an armchair expert saying, well, he should just do something else. Obviously, in the moment, it's really hard to make that split-second decision. But that's what they're trying to get out of the game. And if that's what they're trying to get out of the game, the players have to be more acutely aware of what's happening in those situations. Otherwise, yeah, like you said, if we go back to it next year where it's just 2 weeks a game, then guess what's going to come back? It's going to keep coming back. So 4 weeks, they have to keep it at 4 weeks, and that's pretty much the skinny of it, really.
One interesting subshoot out of this piece of news is the fact the AFL is now considering independent concussion doctors for games as opposed to just having one apiece. Now, I've got to be honest, why this wasn't the status quo from the first game where concussion protocols are mandated is absolutely beyond me, because, and without questioning intention of any medical professionals here who have set foot into university more times than I've had hot dinners this year, it's simply there is a bias there.
Yeah.
There is an absolute, and we've seen what that looks like. We saw it with Port Adelaide last year. I think Butters should have been put in HIA in this game against Richmond. I know he probably acted a bit, but at the end of the day, if there is a free kick for essentially a punch to the head, whether incredibly clumsy or not by Lynch, Butters should have had to go to HIA. And I say that acknowledging he's in a fantastic play, and that absolutely would have hurt Port's chances. But do we not have these rules for a reason?
Yeah. The point is not to only take your players out unless it's a really close game and it's a final. No, it's got to be cut and dry. It's got to be cut and dry.
This has been my problem with the way it's been done up until this point, is that while it hasn't happened yet, if in a hypothetical world, Fremantle are playing in a grand final, I know, save it, but Sarong gets absolutely belted with 15 minutes to go in a close grand final, there's reasons to leave him on the field from within the club, whereas an independent AFL doctor certainly, in theory, should have no bias and should be making a medical decision. Again, I am not suggesting that any of the club doctors have done anything wrong.
Sure.
But it's one of those things where this is a loophole that is there to be exploited if people don't want to act in good faith. So if this is the plan going forward, it needs to be brought in as soon as possible. In fact, I'd argue for it to be brought in as soon as this weekend, because we need to see a multi-strategy approach to managing concussions, not just tribunal. That is part of it. It is not the whole solution.
Agree. I think that's kind of potentially what they've been trying to do from then till now, is seeing if a increasing level of suspensions might curb players' enthusiasm to go head high, but obviously it's not. So yeah, this is the one thing they're going to do outside, like to protect the players. It's a great idea. Another thing they could do to protect the players, Jesse, Lee Matthews has brought it in. He's brought this idea in. Why don't we just have send offs, red cards, yellow cards, sin bins? Lee Matthews, obviously a champion of the game. What are your thoughts around this potential change to the game to kind of alleviate some of those things? Because like you said, 15 minutes left and role reversal in this hypothetical crazy situation where Freo are in a grand final. And Sarong is the one who puts his, shoulder through it in a tackle, knocks somebody out, and the umpire goes, all right, you're off. On replay, you're looking at it going, well, hang on a second, that was innocuous. That was just accidental in-game play contact. What are the repercussions from that?
I'll come to your Sarong hypothetical in a second, but 2 points here.
All
One,
right.
I can't believe of all the people suggested this is Lee Matthews. He would have played half the games that he racked up with the amount of red cards he would have gotten. People forget, because he's such a nice old grandpa at Brisbane,
Sure,
how dirty of a player he was back in the day, which is before my time, which is before your time, Liam. But he was an absolute grub of a player.
Mm.
And he's the one suggesting a red card rule? Really? You expect me to take that on board? Like, sure, if it's Nick, no premierships and lots of complaining revolt suggesting it, sure, I'm open to a bit of discussion with Nick, as long as he doesn't start bursting into tears, of course. But Lee Matthews, really? Are you kidding me? Second of all, no, I actually, this is bad enough to be the punt in the total eclipse of the dart rolled into one here, Liam, because this is an incredibly poor idea for the simple fact that do these umpires not have enough to do as it is?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
They have got to umpire the most complicated, bizarre, backwards game at times, and now we need them to be doing adjudications as to severity of tackles. The umpires, to be clear, are not exactly covering themselves with glory so far this season.
Oh God, no.
But what will this do? What would this actually achieve in terms of that? It depends very much on what you're asking. If you're asking for a send-off for Barry Hall beating Brent Staker halfway from Sydney to Maroochydore, sure. But that might be something very different. But if we're talking direct one-for-ones from footballing action concussions, which, look, again, it was clumsy, but I would argue that Peter Wright's was, I don't see what this achieves. I think this makes it essentially touch football, which, while we need to protect the head as first priority, we need to also remember what we're actually watching here and remember what the legacy of the game is. So I look at this proposal, and it comes up once every couple of years, and we do the same someone dance.
It does.
Someone's got a bit of media capital in the bank suggests it. People like me get very cross and call them angry old grandpas who need to go back to the home, and then we do it again in 2026. The irony of Lee Matthews, of all people, coming out with this, it would be like, it'd be so much like Wayne Carey coming out saying we should ban adultery.
Yeah. Okay. Look. I wasn't too sure how Lee Matthews played in his day, but that correlation was fantastic. Now I know exactly how he played. Like Kerry adults. There you go.
Best on ground.
Best on ground. I agree with you. I think it's there's too much for the umpires to do already. They can barely. I don't want to say get it right because I don't want to be too harsh on them because, like you said, it's a really difficult game to officiate. But they have so much in their plate already. They have so many interpretations of rules they have to remember already that if you're trying to get them to decide when someone should come off the ground because of an action, it would turn the whole thing into chaos. It'd almost be like, bless them, they'd just be looking for that. They'd just be looking for something to send someone off for. And, it would kill the game. It would kill the game. And like, what are you going to have, like 17 on 15 towards the end of the game after a melee? Please.
Well, this is the thing. What happens if that happens? If we just have to start figuring out sending offs.
Match abandoned. Everyone go home. You guys had a bit of a to-do, and we're all going to go home and have a cup of tea, and you guys have to calm down in the naughty corner. Or just have a sim bin where it's 10 minutes and the whole team is just on the bench for 10 minutes. People would love that. People go crazy for that. Just watching an empty field while the clock runs up and the umpires do their little runny dances up and down the field to keep warm. Jesse, you'd love to see that, wouldn't you?
I'd love to see it once. and then I get pretty tearful. Although, to be fair, if my team was getting flogged, it'd actually be 10 minutes apiece.
That's true.
That does have some advantages to it.
Hey, it'd be cause for a melee. Be cause for a melee for getting flogged. Just slow the game down. A momentum killer. Just start a punch on. Bin. Off to the bin you go.
This is off topic, but we talk about how much umpires have to do, and I do think we should just briefly touch on it before we move on into our next point. I'd love to see the umpires go back down from 4 to 3, and the boundary umpires do a bit more instead. Boundary umpires can count to 6. I'm almost certain that they can do that.
Yeah.
I have, despite all the flack they're copying in the media this week, some potentially deserved, some potentially not deserved, I'm confident that primary school graduates, which I'm assuming all of them are at the bare minimum, can count to 6. So why can't they be doing 666?
Well, that's true. 666 should be on them. The other thing I've always wondered
have earpieces.
Well, that's the other thing I've been wondering as well, and this could be a case of too many cooks, but if you went back down to 3 and you've got a boundary umpire who's on the outside of a play where the main field umpire is caught off guard or can't see what's going on, and you got someone clearly in a headlock, what's to stop the field umpire from going just a bit high there, and relaying the information back to the field umpire? That could be, I spoke that out. Probably not a good idea.
No, we see this in soccer all the time. It's very common for linesmen to put through the earpiece what they've seen. Highly recommend if anyone gets a chance after listening to this podcast in its entirety, go track down the Foxtel clip from about 6 years ago of the A-League officials being mic'd up for the whole game. It's a fascinating insight into how a team of officials should be working together. And I think with such a big team, because you've got 2 goal umpires. You got 2 boundary umpires on each side now, don't you? So that's now 6. Yeah. Plus 4 and 5, that's 10. Plus the arc, that's now 11. Plus match officials on the bench, that's at least 12. Like, yes, again, too many cooks poo in the broth. I understand that. But we need to make sure that we're actually utilising these resources properly, because ultimately, what's happening right now with umpiring, in my opinion, isn't working. And it's not necessarily the fault of the umpires. No. I mean, there is the issue, though, that apparently the field umpires, imagine if you give them that task of looking on field as well, they can barely call an out of bounds as it is, apparently. There were some horrific ones this week. I can't remember which play it was. I think it was from Melbourne. Took the mark about a metre outside the boundary line. Umpire didn't call out of the full, and then he played on from outside and ran forward, which is a throw-in. Everyone knows this stuff. I know it's nitpicky, but there was a few of them this week, a few arcs, a few everything that just weren't necessary. Also, quite a few players wandering off their marks by about 3 metres and still being allowed to take this. There was one in the Richmond Port game where, I think it might have been Todd Marshall, was egregiously off his mark. and to the point where the commentators were pointing it out. But the man on the mark's about 2 meters off him on a far. It might have been Finlayson because it was sprayed out in the full.
Yeah, it was Finlayson. Yeah, that's right.
It was an awful kick, but that's not the point here.
Yeah.
So look,
a little bit timid.
Actually, this might lead him. A little bit timid. This might lead him well to our next segment, Liam. I think if I've got the run sheet correctly ordered. Total eclipse
of the dart. All right, total eclipse of the dart. This is the 2 minutes where Jesse gets to rant on whatever he wants for 2 minutes, unabridged. Nothing to distract Jesse from his 2 minute rant, which is about to begin right about now.
We need to talk about reviews and cohesion within the umpiring department, and this includes new technology. First of all, why can't I see a score review on anything filmed better than on a Nokia 3310? It is 2024. We have ultra zoom. We have 4K everything. And yet we're asking ARC officials on legitimate score reviews that need to be reviewed to make these interpretations off, frankly, shit quality vision. It's ridiculous. Why aren't the goalposts cambered up more? I know they've got the ones at the top. That's often actually not that helpful. That's ridiculous in itself. So that's my first complaint. Number 2, ball chip technology. It absolutely has to happen. I don't want to wait for a VFL trial. We need it in the game now. Goal line technology has been operated in the English football pyramid now for a number of years. It is overwhelmingly effective in a specific scenario of hold the ball across the whole of the line. Yes, okay, goal. In this case, has the whole of the ball across the whole of the line. Yes, okay, boundary throw-in. Out on the full. However you need to interpret a decision. It's that simple. This is not something about denigrating the umpires because, as I said, the umpires have the hardest job in the sport to try to manage this, and we need to be attracting more umpires, but we need to be helping them. Umpires will make bad decisions if they're trying to do 1,000,001 things in the space of it and have got no help to do so. Whatever this directive is to do more score reviews, it's a horrific watch, but this isn't meant to be the goal umpires are dumb. Because they're not. These are the same goal umpires who have been making these decisions for years to get to the AFL level. And dare I say, they wouldn't have made many howlers to get to this point in time. Mistakes happen. I'd rather a mistake happen than this constant, tedious stop, start. There was 8 individual score reviews in the GWS West Coast game yesterday. It was an appalling watch. I hated it. The supporters clearly hated it. And I absolutely cannot stand this needless overcorrection of rules interpretation. Thank you, Liam.
Do you know what? I was so invested I didn't even keep an eye on the timer. But your 2 minutes is up, Jesse. Yeah, it's getting a bit out of hand. It's getting a bit out of hand. And I think I brought this up with my last round. We were talking about the ultra zoom and how I thought it was being put to poor use by zooming in on injuries and zooming in on the like. Just use it where it's good. Use it where it's needed. And that's a perfect example of where it's needed. And I've been wondering that for years. Even now, when did when did the score review come in? Probably about a decade ago, right? It feels like it's been a while.
No, sooner than that. More recent than that. I reckon 5, 6 max.
See, I don't know, man, because I was watching some old school classic games.
Let's fact check this.
Fact check with Jesse. Jesse Live, checking to see when exactly the score review for the AFL came out. The 2020-24 Premiership season brought to you by Carlton Dry and potentially Jesse Dart. Oh, it's a very
I reckon I'm looking at this, I'm saying 2017.
2017, okay. Well, my point stands.
Look, potentially before, because the fact that I can't get this off a simple Google search shows how broken this sport can be at times.
But to your point, though, to your point, that's what I was going to, like I said last week, is the camera quality is still exactly the same as it was back then. We've advanced. Why haven't they advanced that? Is it to keep some ambiguity in there?
But I don't think we need that. I don't think we need ambiguity here.
Of course not.
Honestly,
that was sarcasm.
This current system is the single worst video review system that I have seen in any sport anywhere. Mm-hmm. It is unfathomable how badly this is implemented.
Yeah.
You look at anything from coaches' challenges in the NFL to DRS in cricket to any form of VAR. And look, VAR has not always been a successful system, but I don't think you look at it and say it's fundamentally wrong, but they've also gone and changed it. because now the officials are encouraged to keep their flags down and let the play run if they think it's offside, rather than flag it be wrong, and then it get overturned on VAR that way. So they've been willing to make changes, and I've got to say, VAR's pretty unintrusive. I much prefer not having to watch much of VAR being in the championship. It does feel like a bit of a safe haven there. The trade-off is you get rubbish officiating, but I don't mind that. I don't mind rubbish officiating if the rubbish officiating is not then given an opportunity to correct itself and then doesn't correct itself. That's infuriating officiating, and that's when people get cross at umpires or referees and abuse them, which begins this cycle. So my overarching point here is either fix it for the start of next season or get rid of it, because this isn't working.
Just bring in the 5 challenge system. You get 5 challenges a game. Umpires call until then, and if you don't make a challenge, you have to shut up. Just shut up.
I'd be totally up for it being a captain's review system, much like DRS.
Yeah.
That obviously needs to be worked through by people smarter than myself. But I think that is a better system fundamentally than what we have right now, especially when the directive is very clearly review everything. We have the most exciting, relentless game on our hands. We don't need to make it an office job.
No,
it's pretty simple as far as I'm concerned.
I can't agree with you more, Jesse. Can't agree with you more, but it's time to move on to some games. Round 2 in the books. Like we said at the top of the show, some strange games, some great games, some not so great games. We're going to kick it off right with St Kilda 14-10-94, defeating Collingwood 12-7-79. And that's twice in a row I've used the word defeated or wins in surprise shock, because Collingwood, what is going on with them?
This is a shade alarming now. It's not they're going to miss the finals alarming yet. But it's a very much a, oh dear, where exactly is this Collingwood team at? Because I can forgive them the first 2 games. That's generally fine, albeit a bit shocking. But this St Kilda side is not very good, is it?
No.
This is not a very good team.
St Kilda, to their credit, played a very good game. They played that game. They played that game like it was their grand final. They did not stop. They were relentless, and it showed. They played against a team that, but to your point though, for the most part, when it was a close game, when St Kilda were going hammer and tong, and Collingwood were phoning it in, and it was still a relatively close game. So I don't know. It's good that St Kilda got this win, but to your point.
A very common theme of me speaking throughout this round is this game gave us more questions than answers. I think this might be the Riddler himself in terms of that, because I don't know if this makes St Kilda good. I don't know if this makes Collingwood rubbish. I don't know if this is a complete aberration on both. Honestly, I don't know looking at this result. On one hand, St Kilda have scored, which has proven difficult for them in the past. They've defended well, which we would expect from them, but they've also outran Collingwood and shown a different side to their game than perhaps we expected to see for a Ross Lyon coach team.
Yes.
The pressure trademark was very much there, but the overlap run was, and gee, how good did Liam Henry look?
Until he did his hammy, he looked very good.
He really seemed to get it on Thursday night. And if he can be that highlight player for them, obviously once he gets back from injury, then that's legitimately exciting for St Kilda fans.
Yeah, 100%.
He copped a lot of flack over the years at Fremantle for being all duck, no dinner in more ways than one, but what he is an exciting player. And what he showed on Thursday night is that he can influence games much in the mold of players like Shai Bolton, in the mold of players like Nick Dacos, who, I don't know if you know this, Liam, but it was actually his 50th game on Thursday night.
Oh, was it? I didn't see anything covered in the news about that at all. No.
There wasn't any rankings for the all 50 games or anything.
Never. Was that ranked for all 50 games? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Cal Twomney did it. He ranked all 50. And you might hear about that a bit later as well, Liam, in our special segment, the punty.
Oh, yes.
That's a massive spoil. You will hear about that in the punting.
Holy shit, of course, which you can find on @dodgypunts on Instagram as well. God, we got to remember to plug the show, Jesse. Come on. We got too excited to get into it tonight. Our punter you can find there, which is our AFL media worst takes of the week. So you can get involved there as well. Man, I don't know. It was a strange game for me. Like, because watching it, Collingwood, I'm not sure if they've just given themselves premiership poisoning. Like the hangover was that bad that they're still coming down from it. But they looked kind of lethargic, not the usual on point selves. Like they kind of didn't give a shit. You know, it kind of reminded me of a bit of an F1 analogy. Max Verstappen, one of the best drivers in the world, right? No one likes to watch him win because he wins all the time. It's boring. But he's got this arrogance to him that when he tries to take a corner, he expects the other person to get out of the way. And when the other driver doesn't get out of the way, he has a bit of a strop. I kind of felt that was Collingwood a little bit the other night. So when they were trying to do their normal kind of come back and run and gun and St Kilda were countering it, they kind of had a bit of a strop and just kind of went, well, this isn't working. And then didn't seem to change tact, didn't seem to change course. They just kind of went, meh, fine.
What was your thoughts on the officiating of the match?
Look, this was back on last Thursday. So I can't, and there's been that many games I've watched this week that I can't remember anything specific. I will say this: I don't think Jack Higgins. I don't think that was out. I think that was a good goal from the boundary line. That was fantastic. And you know, you got people drawing the lines. You know, like they did a few years back. I can't remember who it was. Drawing the lines down across.
Must have been Roughhead's famous one.
It must have been Roughhead's famous. It was a while back, and people were like doing the lines and going, "No, the ball's in," all this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, one goal doesn't matter. They were outplayed on the day, but the officiating, Jesse, look, I'll let you take that one because I honestly don't remember, and clearly you do. So please shed some light.
Yeah, look, I'm worried about it. I'm worried about how poorly the rules are being judged. And look, on one hand, the free kick count massively skewed towards St Kilda.
Oh, that's right,
everyone's favourite metric to point to, that, you know, my team is being screwed, rah, there's a conspiracy.
Oh, okay. I've just remembered.
But this was a pretty badly officiated game, I felt. And I feel like we need to be comfortable talking about poorly officiated games from an analysis perspective without it being rah, go boo the umpires, because that's not what we're advocating for here. But that does not make them immune from criticism just because, they're umpires.
No, of course not. I do remember a couple of incidents now. It was the Jordan DeGoey running forward, clearly being held, no call, then gets called for holding the ball. That was one. The front on contact, I think it was on McCleary in the goal square. Like, there was no eye contact on the ball from the St Kilda player and just barreled into him front on, no call, nothing. That's the only two I remember.
But they are the two most egregious ones. So that's pretty good recollection there. I think
that is true.
The overarching point here has to be, though, is primarily that we cannot have poorly officiated games, A, at all, but B, in these key time slots, because people are going to get very frustrated very quickly, as neutral fans, never mind as fans of the club that has been, and I say this in quotation marks here, screwed.
Yeah.
Collingwood, I don't think, got the rub of the green of the umpires on Thursday night. That happens. It's happened to Fremantle. It's happened against Fremantle many times. I remember one game against GWS, we got about 18 free kicks to 5 at one stage, and I felt like every time the whistle was blown, we were getting the ball, and it was great. Obviously, games happen both ways for whatever reason.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
Collingwood gave away some clumsy ones, but St Kilda were also, at times, breaking the rules of the game. Whether clumsily, whether through a lack of skill, however the case may be, but free kicks should have been going to Collingwood that weren't. My concern is that, yes, the umpiring pool is relatively thin, so where's the accountability going to be for these umpiring efforts as a collective? We know that only certain umpires get to umpire the grand final. Cool. We generally know who they're going to be. But what about the umpires who are trying to fight for their spot and push up, but also the ones that have maybe had a couple of weeks in a row making bad decisions? I'm not saying these specific ones did, but if this umpiring group comes out this week and has a stinker, what's the accountability there?
Yeah. No, there really isn't any, right? Because that's one of the massive issues at the moment. It's like who's in the wings? Who's going to be there to step in? Do they want anyone else to step in? It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. But we won't talk about umpiring too much more because I think we've done a fair whack on it tonight. But that was probably the most egregious of the umpiring decisions across the week.
There is actually one more I need to talk about in one of the later games, but I'll save it for then.
That's fine. So yeah, St Kilda, good win for them. But yes, more questions than answers. Moving right along to Adelaide 11-11-77, defeated by Geelong 14-12, 96. Jesse, we were at the pub watching this game, having a couple of beers. What do you remember of this game? Because I don't remember much.
I live. Look, I will say this. I think Adelaide fans, despite being 0-2, they're not a club that should be reaching for the panic button. In fact, I think they'll potentially win this week. However, Adelaide played good. Geelong just played better. And Geelong played some sexy football, reminiscent of the last premiership era, more so than their most recent one. And it was actually very fun to watch. Geelong seem to be going through their identity change. We talked about this last week about do they detonate and rebuild or do they try to push on? I still think they need to detonate to an extent, but this team can make finals if they play like that.
Yeah.
Because simply put, they've gone and scrapped a win out against St Kilda. They've then gone and outclassed Adelaide in Adelaide. That's a pretty... I don't think you could ask for much more. If I'm a Geelong fan, I'm over the moon right now. I'm not booking my leave for September just yet, but I'm pretty happy with where we are. Sure. And there's a couple of clubs will be in that situation too, where they'll be like, hey, things are looking pretty good for my team right now. We're getting some wins on the board. We're getting some results. And importantly, we're winning these games that are probably 10, 15-point swings to either team. We've seen what that can do to clubs. Western Bulldogs won a premiership out of it. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how Geelong go in subsequent weeks, and very interesting to see how Adelaide go in subsequent weeks. But ultimately, you don't lose when you're winning, so I'm not saying that Adelaide still win out of this game, but their brand of football is going to win them games this year. They'll need to start doing that pretty soon, but I'm not panicking about them. Geelong, though, very pleasantly surprised with what I've seen from them so far this season.
Yeah, hard to argue. I mean, Tommy Hawkins, for a 36-year-old guy, how old is he? He's nearly my age. He's been doing his 350th game this week. He's been around for ages. He feels like he's just part of the furniture now. But he's still got it. He can still take a good grab. He can still kick a goal. He's very useful, even at his age, and even for a bigger fella who don't tend to last as long in the game. He's getting the dad bod going though, that's for sure. You can see his face. He's still got the baby face, but he's a stocky dude. He's always been stocky, but he's like dad stocky. Do you know what I mean? But no, I agree with you. I think Adelaide need to turn it on pretty soon for them to start making some inroads into this season. And yeah, I can't disagree. No, I can't agree more. Jesse is what I'm trying to say. With Geelong,
thank you.
I'm surprised too. It's good to see. Is it? I don't know why I said that. I'm not sure if it is good to see.
No, I think it is, because you don't see these consistent dynasties in such an egalitarian sport.
That's true. That's true.
Yes, on one hand, from an outsider looking in and just as a supporter of another club, it is a bit boring to see Geelong go ahead and do it again. But from a actual football administration, football finance point of view, it's pretty incredible. And it's pretty exciting to think of the prospect of they might be able to go and keep this success going for potentially 2 decades. If they can make finals twice between now and 2027, I'd argue that makes it 2 decades in terms of being the benchmark club in the AFL. They've already got it covered for 15 years. Why not go and try it for 20? Why not? And that's including an incredibly high-tide Hawthorn as well for half of that period.
100%. 100%. I think they were kind of the flavour of the year for a few years, kind of dipped away. But it won't take them much to get back up there. So, yeah, we'll see how they go. We'll see how they kick on. Now, Jesse, we must move on to North Melbourne 11-10-76, defeated by our Fremantle Dockers 15-12, 102. The tale of two very different games within a game. Very strange. Both of us were watching it from our respective domiciles, I'm assuming, or you were out somewhere else. Clearly upset with that. You were home. Clearly upset with that first quarter and a half, both of us texting each other back and forward. What the heck is going on? Who is this team? Sack Justin Longmuir. What's going on? And then all of a sudden, Luke Jackson steps up. Caleb Sarong steps up. Brayshaw steps up. Fifey starts playing. And all of a sudden, for 2 weeks in a row now, we've got A+ on the opponent to really change course of the game and end up winning somewhat convincingly. But, and this is a big but, we cannot have those slow starts anymore, because those slow starts are going to cost us big time against a quality opposition. It can't happen. Good to get the win. Obviously, great to get the win. Good to see Jackson step up. He was really great. But yeah, those slow starts are going to kill us.
Liam, can I tell you what infuriates me?
Of course, Jesse. That's what we're here for.
Slow starts have been a Fremantle problem as far back as Longmuir was starting. And probably further back than that, but we'll keep it relevant. We'll keep it relevant to this point. Remember that famous win against Melbourne at the MCG? Where we spent the first half being more competitive against the Pigeons than we were against our direct opponents. And then all of a sudden we just turned it around. Travis Collier had the game of his life and we won, and it was amazing. And it's the best away game I've ever had the privilege of attending live.
Oh, you were there?
You're
lucky.
I was there.
You lucky bugger.
Just before we crossed paths, actually, about a month and a half before we crossed paths for the first time. Fun, niche friendship fact. So how sentimental on the Dodgy Punts AFL podcast.
Love it.
Not very often you get me into a Longmuir rant and then you get a moment of sentiment. But look, what I will say is these slow starts comes down to poor coaching, because what is going on to the point where this club cannot physically compete in the first quarter consistently?
Strange. So strange.
But what infuriates me as well is the whole game plan changes at quarter time.
Yeah.
So can we not do that for 4 quarters? If it's a matter of absolutely gassing us in the last quarter, then I question where's the strength and conditioning going. But also, I don't understand why we have to do the same game plan at the start of the game every week, when that game plan, as we saw very well last year, is a bottom third game plan in the competition. Mm-hmm. When these guys get going, and we see it with Jackson, we see it with Sarong, who just continues to have incredible numbers, and he is a genuine Brownlow contender, make no mistake about that. If he continues to have this kind of output and this impact on games, he can win a Charlie. Mm-hmm. Against potentially all the odds, he can win a Charlie. We had a quiet one from Jai Miss. I was really impressed with Taberner, and what you see from Taberner was he was taking some of his chances, which is very beneficial for him. But what Taberner isn't appreciated for, and it's what they've tried to turn Tracy into, is Taberner's ability to get up and down the ground and bring other players into the contest is right up there with some of the best key forwards in the competition. When a healthy Taberner is covering that area from about 20 metres out from goal to the wing, he adds another dimension to Fremantle, because he clears out that space. The amount of times when we had a fit Taberner and Darcy in the team, and Darcy would drop in from the midfield and fill that hole that Taberner would run out of by going forward and getting the ball himself, that worked. Mm-hmm. Now we have Jai Miss thrown into that equation as well. I think Taberner's almost undroppable this season if he stays fit. Wow. Because the fit Taberner assumes he's able to make those runs back and forth. I often chastise certain key forwards for not being goal-a-game key forwards. Not only is Taberner that already as it is, but I don't see a scenario where he's not going to be that this season, because he's able to get himself back into position fast enough. But he's also a very good mark too. So he's going to get his set shots. Mm-hmm. I was really, really pleased with what I saw from Taberner. I thought Draper showed a lot. The caveat is he was probably entitled to, given he wasn't given the Larky matchup. So you certainly hope he shows a bit, and I think he did, and I think that's a really good sign for him. I'm pleased we didn't play Reedy. I don't think he's the answer to the non-Darcy problem. But I want to talk about North Melbourne too.
I was going to say, because I was about to cut you off and say, we've got to talk about North. We've got to talk about North because...
Give me Wardlaw, Sheasel, Davies, Uniacke for the next 10 years. Just hand it to me. I thought Cherry played a really good game too, as well in the ruck. Yeah. Given he's probably not regarded as an elite ruckman, I think before Jackson figured out that, hey, I'm not going to be able to wrestle this guy into the ground, he was looking really dominant. And yes, the game swung a bit as Jackson kind of got into his own groove, but I thought Cherry was very honest and competed as well as he could have the whole game. But this Wardlaw, Sheasel, Davies-Uniacke option that North Melbourne have, I genuinely think can win them a premiership in 5 years' time. Because that midfield screams prime West Coast. It screams prime Geelong. There's so much to like about the way these three operate, both independently and collectively, that I want to be behind North Melbourne in the next few years. I think they'll make finals in 3 years. I know I've made that point on the show before. I think they'll make finals in 3 years, and I think the pieces, we're now starting to see the shine coming through from all that polishing of the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think looking at the game, that first quarter and a half was something that was really amazing to watch, because I think that was the thing I was taking out of it going, holy crap, maybe Jesse was right. Maybe 3 years is more of a likely time frame. I said 5, you said 3. And watching them run and watching them go ballistic through the whole field, running us out of the park, was insane to watch. Obviously, there must be something in there that they can't maintain that. Obviously, they can't maintain that for a long period of time, which is something they're going to have to work on. They had that period and a half, quarter and a half at the start where they went bananas. Last quarter, they started to come back, and if they kicked a couple of goals, to be honest, might have made it a little bit more interesting than it was. But they
let Fremantle into the game. They went from 8-1 to 8-4 of 3 very kickable set shots, and left the door open for Fremantle to come back.
Yeah.
2 of those go in. We're probably writing a eulogy for Longmuir's coaching career right now. I've still got it in the drawer if we need to get it out, but there's every possibility that's what we would have been doing.
Yeah, but you know what? At the end of the day, not what happened. Freo took home the 4 points. Good signs for North Melbourne. I think you'd be quite encouraged if you're a North Melbourne fan, looking at seeing what you've got coming up in your future. A great young team with a lot of talent, and hopefully, I think they can string a couple of wins together this year. They can shock somebody. Yeah. I'm sure. Now we move on to a game that I was a little bit disappointed by, only because it's Hawthorn 5-8-38. Defeated by Melbourne 14-9, 93. Well, if this wasn't one of 2 games where it was just the big men against the boys, like it looked like a waffle side going out there to take on a team that's starting to turn it around a little bit this year. Obviously, playing against Hawthorn isn't too much of a barometer as to where your season is currently at, unfortunately. But yeah, a bit of a sad one for Hawks, unfortunately. Not the footy we were hoping to see from them. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, it feels like a step back for Hawthorn with what they've been building or the identity they've been trying to create, because they weren't the Hawthorn that were throwing themselves at the game like we saw last week against Essendon. It was a real tired, almost boring display. Mm-hmm. And look, potentially we've underestimated Melbourne with all the off-field issues. I still think we need to be mindful of that, keeping in mind there's still stuff to play out with Smith's Asada probe coming up. So there's still more to play out there. But my fear for Melbourne, my point for Melbourne here is they've beaten 2 sides that were comfortably expected to beat, but they struggled almightily in a game where it could have gone either way, at least on paper, when they played Sydney in round 1. Mm-hmm. That tells me that they can pick up enough wins to be there in September. But I'm concerned about what the impact in September they will actually be.
Yeah. Fair shout. A couple of injuries next week to May and old fella.
Petty?
We'll stick with Petty. That's right.
I can't think of a player that I actually generally like watching for opposition teams more than Stephen May. His ability to organise that Melbourne back 6 is brilliant. And honestly, it's reminiscent of Darren Glass at West Coast in terms of the ability to just organise and be an incredible one-on-one defender himself, but also make every other defender around him better. So he's going to be a big loss for them, potentially more so for his actual value in that back 6 than his specific defending, although he is a very good defender. Mm-hmm. That'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. And if I'm a forward in the next couple of weeks, taking on Melbourne, I'm really focused on how I can exploit this
Licking your lips.
potential breakdown in communication, especially as a small forward. I'm really focusing on my craft with that in mind.
100%. Well, it's crazy enough. He's a bit of a bull. He's older. I know that's obviously Petrarca's nickname, but he's a mean-faced bull is Stephen May, and the fact that he can break 3 ribs and they're talking about him being back in 2 weeks is insane. But maybe he's just maybe he is just a superhuman. Now, here we go. Are you ready? Sydney 1917 131 defeated Essendon 15-11 101. High scoring affair, which is always nice to see. We like to see that kind of stuff, but this is it.
A few teams chalking over 100 points this round, which is always nice to see.
Yeah. But it's kind of rare in this day and age. I can't remember the last time I saw 2 teams get over 100 points. Like
it's going to become less rare, I think, now that we're starting to see the stand rule and 666 properly understood by the coaching teams as well. I'm expecting this to be the expectation, not the norm, moving forward. But that's an interruption. Please continue.
What's Essendon Edge game? Ooh, look at them. So edgy with the Essendon Edge game. Now listen, I get what Brad Scott's trying to do. He's trying to bring this team to get a little bit, bit of niggle about them, maybe a little bit of the old school about them. But I don't know, man. It was unconvincing for me watching them play and try to be. It was almost like they were trying to be a team they weren't. They didn't look like they wanted. They weren't comfortable going out there and getting in the face of everybody. And they weren't. Draper, his late charge on one of the City players after a mark, and he just flops on the floor like afterwards, like Superman. It didn't convince me that was the way forward for them, or at least they went too hard too soon. There was no build to that kind of gameplay. It was kind of like, well, this week we're going to bring the Essendon edge and we're going to start frackers and we're going to get. And at the end of the day, they got handily outplayed by a very, very classy team who saw pretty much straight through the facade and just outplayed them across the field. It's all well and good playing a game style like that if you're doing it the rest of the stuff around the field to actually get the win. And to be fair, kicking 101 points in most games is probably that. But there was no adjustment to the plan. Sydney outran them. They rebounded off defense too easily. And at the end of the day, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. They were against a lesser team, it might potentially work. But I always have this thing at footy, like, do teams go really hard with those tactics against the better sides to try and throw the better sides off their game? But then they come and play a team like a North or a Hawthorn, and they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, oh, we'll forget that plan. Let's go back to the other plan. I don't know. It felt weird to me. It felt forced. It didn't feel natural for the Essendon style. Wasn't a fan. Jesse, thoughts?
Yeah, overall I agree. A lot of your points that you made, I don't think I could articulate better myself. The biggest thing for me is, as you said, this doesn't look like a team that wants to do it.
Mm.
This isn't a gritty, hardened, battle-ready team. This is a team that's rebuilding and has a lot of young players in it that, let's be honest, and look, compared to me, who could be defeated by most pot plants in any kind of combat, they're not that big. Like, these aren't massive, by AFL standards, these aren't massive guys.
No.
Like, what would a light breeze do to some of these players? Like, it would send them
Brody Grundy
away.
Brody Grundy grabbed one of them by the scruff of the shirt and just went, poof, a very, very light tug, and that face plant straight away. There was no, wasn't even difficult for old Brody. Wasn't a problem. Look,
I might be in the minority here. I would actually generally like to see a team try this for a whole season and see what it would look like. I just don't think Essendon is that team. I think there's plenty of other teams that could adopt this game style more effectively than what they can. I actually think this would really, really suit the Western Bulldogs down to the ground with what they have. But I just don't think it's Essendon. And simply put, they probably did dent the actual margin of the game just from the shock value of it all. So maybe from a Brad Scott point of view, mission accomplished.
Sure.
But I don't think this strategy for this team and this list profile is going to work in the medium to long term, i.e. till the end of the season. Correct. Essendon won't be in the finals. That's pretty pretty well understood, I think. So good on them for giving it a go. Good on them for trying something different. But
Yeah, sure.
as I said, what if they try to see Sydney and they just don't bother against North Melbourne, and then North go and turn them over? Well, then what have they actually achieved?
Yeah. I think they've got a really good chance to back it up this week. And actually, we'll get to that in our tips later on. They've got a really good chance to back it up and see what they do with it. But you can't say enough good things about Sydney at the moment. They're just getting it done. They're looking very, very good. There's not much more to say about it that we didn't say last week. They're just looking like the minor premiership favourites at the very minimum, if not strong premiership contenders. And to say that this early on, which I usually hesitate to do given that it's so early in the season, but right now they seem to be heads above the rest. It just seems to be head above the rest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not even a question. All right, let's moving on to game number 6. Western Bulldogs 18-7-115, defeating the Gold Coast Suns 10-7-67. The Vibe Cup is not going very well this week, Jesse.
Yeah, this was just a matter of, I think, experience in game management here. Gold Coast have some really nice pieces. Jed Walter is going to be a star. I love watching him play from the one game that we have seen from him. But the Bulldogs just simply had the experience and that ability to shut down that we're able to get to do. I will say this, though, and this is maybe something for the dodgy punts side of things. You're going to have to back the overs at Ballarat for total score every time it's there. That wind was absolutely howling.
Yeah.
And it almost makes me unsure of what to think because, yes, both teams get 2 quarters to kick at it. But wins like that massively distort games of football.
Yeah.
Because you're now coupling wind with momentum. So despite an 8-goal loss, I'm not necessarily saying Gold Coast are done. And after an 8-goal win, I'm not really ready to declare the Bulldogs. They were better than they were against Melbourne last week significantly. But that effort is still imprinted in my brain.
Well, there's not much you can argue about a 9-goal one first quarter. Like accuracy gets it done, right? Goals on the board, you're going to win games of footy, and to get 9 goals one behind in a quarter of footy and the first quarter to set yourself up is going to be really hard to overcome by any team. A complete flip reverse for Gold Coast Suns. They've had the last 2 games where they've gone ahead by a long margin, and other teams have clawed them back. This game, they had that done against them and they couldn't claw it back, which goes to say that they kind of need to have that strong start for them to actually maintain their game across the entire 4 quarters. And if they don't get that, then they're going to be in a bit of trouble, I would say, moving forward as well. But let's see. Anything else to add about this one?
Just it's a bit of a don't know game for me.
Yeah.
A bump on the road for the Gold Coast, a peak for the Bulldogs this season, but honestly, we need more footy from both of them. Like, whereas with teams like Sydney, we get the idea of where they're going to be at. With teams like North and West Coast, we probably know where they're going to be at. But I think these two still need to figure out their exact kind of pecking order spot. So I'll reserve judgment on both for now.
Fair shout. Richmond 13-14-92 defeated by Port Adelaide 18-14 122. Now, I watched some of this game, some of the highlights just before we started tonight, because it was the one game across the weekend I didn't really get to see a lot of. And from what I could see, it seemed to be actually a fairly even contest for 3 and a bit quarters until Port kind of took it away in the end.
Yeah, and I'm really frustrated about this, Liam. I'm genuinely frustrated about this. And this almost made it as the Total Eclipse had done itself, but I wanted to make it more universal.
Okay.
But Port Adelaide stole all momentum off a goal that was clearly touched.
Okay.
Off a goal that Jaden Shaw has very clearly gotten his finger to.
Okay.
The umpire correctly asserted to Shaw and other Richmond players, every goal gets reviewed.
Mm.
So why was this not overturned? For all the frustration that we have had in the first 3 rounds of this season when it comes to over-reviewing, the one, I guess, benefit to it has been, well, at least we can get the decisions right.
Yeah.
That logic is now shattered as a result of this moment, and it's really irritated me. Because on one hand, you've now got a situation where, look, Port Adelaide keeps another 4 odd goals after that. They've won the game by 30 points. Sure. but I don't think you can understate the value of the goal at the time it went in. Right at the start of the fourth quarter, Richmond had just kicked 2 goals on a quick run into three-quarter time and had the momentum. This isn't just an incorrect umpiring decision. It's a logic breaker to what they have been claiming the entire season. And this brings me back to my point of, if you're not going to do it right, which based on this they're not, then you need to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because how can a Richmond supporter in good faith be happy with that decision? Can you imagine if this happened against Fremantle? Imagine how cross I would be.
Oh, yes.
Because this isn't a matter of this isn't a matter of the umpire making a wrong decision. To be clear, I don't expect the goal umpire to see a ball being touched for 30 metres away. That's the field umpire's job to adjudicate whether that ball was touched or not. And again, it was a fairly close-cut thing. But with the slow-motion camera technology, you can clearly see that it is.
Mm.
So why is that not being actually looked at? If that has been looked at and upheld as a goal, then frankly, I don't know what to tell you. Because to my eye, that is just about as clear of a touch as you can see. We've seen them overturned for a lot less. So I'll come back to the game in a second, but this fundamentally defeats the whole purpose of the score review system, both umpire initiated and every goal is reviewed. Because if we're not going to get it right of what, in my opinion, is a fairly obvious overturn, then what's the point of the whole system?
Yeah. I mean, hard to argue, is it?
As for the game,
yes, the
Zach
game.
Butters is really starting to come into his own here as a player. He gets under the opposition's skin. He makes his teammates better. And he's going to be a very, very, very good player for Port Adelaide for many years to come if he stays at the club.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Dixon is almost putting together for, I think, one last run here. He looks really threatening. He just needs to rediscover some of that 2020, 2021 form, I think, of Port. Todd Marshall is another one that's almost there, and he's almost getting it right. I don't really know what to make of Richmond because, to be honest, I thought they were fantastic on Sunday.
Really good. They looked really good.
How they played.
Yeah.
But they're being let down by key players.
Yeah.
Shai Bolton is not having a good season. He has had a disastrous start to his campaign. Lynch gets a pass because I don't think he's fully fit yet, but he looks to be struggling a bit. Jaden Short had a howler in the first quarter where he drops a simple mark, lose control of the ball, it's an easy goal. Yes, it's one mistake in the game, but when you're talking a game of margins, these things do matter. So I think for Richmond right now, they're in a very much a Geelong-type conundrum. Do they detonate or do they rebuild? Honestly, I'd be trying to sucker in Fremantle or West Coast to take Bolton.
Okay.
For the record, I really hope that Fremantle don't, but I think they'll sucker him. The one player they can't lose is Liam Baker because he was phenomenal.
Yeah, he was great.
Brilliant. It was brilliant. The energy that he plays with, I don't know whether this is going to be one of those contract years that players sometimes have, where they just play out of their skin because their deal's coming up, which absolutely does happen. But he looks like an asset. Now, when the rumours started swirling about Baker buying the house in WA, maybe looking to come home, my first thought was, I'm not really sure where he fits into Fremantle's team. I think we got Geordie Clark, Hayden Young, those type of guys. I didn't necessarily see the immediate need for Baker to come in. I think you have to go after him. I go after him harder than I go after McDonald.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that he looks like he can add a lot of that punch that Fremantle now miss as a result of not having Lachie Schultz.
Mm. Interesting. I mean,
Richmond need to throw the kitchen sink at keeping him though. If they want to go again in the next couple of years, Baker has to stay at the club.
It did seem like a really even game in terms of like the back and forth. It was the two running teams play like for like almost. Like both of them just run and gun the entire game. I think one of the lowest tackle counts in a game of footy I've seen in quite some time because the ball was just too fast. It was moving. It was always moving, and yeah, I didn't know about that, the touch thing to kind of sway momentum, but yeah, Port Adelaide. I mean, it's still a handy 5-goal win. Like it's not a small margin, but your point's taken. Your point's taken. But we must move on because we've got one more game to talk about. West Coast 5-13-43, defeated by GWS 16-12, 108. Game 2 of the big boys versus the kids. Look, I don't think there's much more Eagles could have shown us than what they did, to be honest with you. Like, they had some really nice patches, some nice runs, some nice gun. Harley Reid showed what he can do until it was clotheslined. Like he looked the goods, but look, it's quite clear they can't go for 4 quarters of footy. It's quite clear that they're a team at sea at the moment. And while they've got some good young kids, if you put them side by side, you put West Coast list side by side with North Melbourne's, you can see that even North Melbourne are miles ahead of the whole process.
The trouble for West Coast is, and this is something that they're going to need to work out, is that they're now in this really perilous position where they can either essentially accept floggings on a weekly basis. To be clear, I don't think GWS actually tried that hard.
They didn't. No, I don't think they did.
I really think they were half-assing it for a fair bit of the game. But what I will say is here, Jack Darling is no longer AFL standard. I don't think that's controversial. No. I think Jamie Cripps is bordering on that territory now.
Fleeting passages that looked good. Yeah.
And herein lies the problem. If your senior players aren't up to it, the guys that are meant to be guiding in the next generation, you have 2 options. You could either drop them on the basis of performance, which has already happened to Gaff, or you keep them and let them play substandard football. I'd actually be quite interested to hear what West Coast supporters think of this. Are guys like Gaff and Darling ruining a legacy? Darling was getting Bronx cheers from the West Coast fans, which really, I think, shows you where... And look, Darling's always been a bit of a whipping boy to an extent because he does do some very silly things. But I think ultimately you can't deny his commitment and his premiership medallion for the club. You know, he spent the better part of a decade toiling away as Josh Kennedy's understudy, where he probably could have been a main key forward somewhere else at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But herein lies the problem. Are these guys destroying their legacy? I mean, I'll probably remember Gaff for a few things. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Brayshaw. Mm-hmm. How bad he's been in the last 2 years. And then, but he was such a good accumulator for those few years as well. He was a really good player. And North Melbourne tried to pretty much sell this training ground to get him at one point. But that's the thing. 2 of those things are now negatives. Well, some West Coast fans may view others as otherwise, but certainly one, the way he's played in the last couple of years, is an inherent negative. Cripps got his goal, but he struggled all game. Don't let that fool you. He was pretty poor all game. I don't think Tim Kelly's going particularly well. I think
he's trying
Geelong
that, Tim. Like, he's trying. He seems to be like...
Was that Geelong lightning in a bottle just that?
Yeah, I think with the Geelong, I think what it was he was surrounded by a lot of very good players who were feeding him the ball. And when he came over to West Coast, he didn't have that. So he was kind of, shown up a little bit as to what his actual, qualifications were around the ground. Not to say he's a bad player, because I don't think he is, but I think he was definitely elevated by a really, really great Geelong side when he was there. So
McGovern continues to be a brilliant defender and organiser.
Oh, he's great. He's fantastic.
Phenomenal. He's great. Elliot Yeo, seeing him back close to his best was genuinely brilliant to see. He looked very good, and I sincerely hope that he can keep his body in check and do that. But there were other veterans that didn't stand up. Duggan was pretty poor, I thought. I get that you probably need to throw him in the midfield now, but it's a bit of a worry. Other guys, I think, Jaden Hunt had his moments, but there does seem to be a real lack of desire. And that's not to say that the players aren't committed to the team and the club, but you do see this, like, realistically, people know what they're going to get out of West Coast every week. They're probably going to get flogged. Mm. How bad has that got to be on the psychology of players like Jaden Hunt, who's played in a Melbourne Premiership era? How hard is that going to be for guys like Tim Kelly, who exited one of the strongest Geelong midfields of the modern era of any club, and now has this. How tough has it got to be on guys like Darling and McGovern who were there for the good old days?
Yeah.
It's really hard now and it's got to be hard for these players trying to push through as well. Guys like Harley Reid and Jimmy can have good games of football, but are they having good games of football in the context of, well, no one else is playing very well in the team, or are they actually having legitimately good games of football? To be clear, I'm not weighing in on that either way. I'm just putting the thought out there.
Sure.
Is this actually good for their development to be the main guy? Sometimes it works wonders. Guys like Leo Messi at Barcelona, like sometimes it legitimately does wonders to go in and be the star from day one. But where the West Australian media spotlight is so firmly focused on where the club is at, I don't envy these younger players that have now got to build it. And I think Harley Reid is going to have a new number 1 draft pick best friend off the way that North Melbourne have played in the first 2 weeks and how West Coast played. More so yesterday. I think they were pretty solid against Port, and they showed flashes yesterday, on Sunday, that is, for those who don't know when we record. But ultimately, they have a lot to think about, I think, in terms of what they need to do with Darling and Cripps specifically. I'd drop them if I was the senior coach.
Just do it. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, honestly, just clear it out. Keep McGovern in there. Keep Duggan in there, because is he the captain?
Duggan is the captain.
Duggan is the captain. I know more than I do. I just kind of second guess myself. So they should keep those guys and just bring in the kids. Like, at this point, there is literally no harm in it, because what's the worst that can happen? Like, at the moment, they're putting in maybe 3 to 4 minutes of patches throughout a quarter, and then they fade away, and they come back and they fade away. They come back and fade away. Like, nothing. The divide just seems to be too great at the moment for them to overcome anyone, unless they get someone on a really bad day, really, really bad day, which they nearly did last year a couple of times, so it can happen.
They caught GWS in this round last year. They almost got Geelong. They almost got Fremantle in the first derby.
And Essendon as well, yeah. Yeah. So it can
happen. They can do it.
They can do it. They're just going to play the kids now. They've got no choice. I mean, there's no other recourse that you can see for them coming out of this. You just play the kids. Chuck out the kids.
I guess the worry to that is that how much more can West Coast fans take? Because they were pretty awful at the back end of 2022. They were terrible last year. I do think they've shown some improvement this year.
I'll say this, Jesse, and we'll leave it and we'll have to move on. But I will say this. There are some West Coast fans I've spoken to at work, and there are plenty of them. And a lot of them are upset, but also understand that they have to take the bad with the good. They understand they've been so good for so long that they're going to have to take a few years of pain. Only one that I've heard of has been like, I'm going to tear up my membership. And I'm like, you're a fool. You're a damn fool, because this team has given you so much, and it's going to be a tough run. It is going to be a tough run, but that's your team. Stick with them. Because
will these be the same responses in 2026? Because realistically, it's definitely going to be bottom 4 this year. Yeah. It's definitely going to be bottom 4 this year. It's probably going to be bottom 2. They still need to essentially clear out Gaff, Darling, etc. These spots need to be regenerated. The biggest problem they face is that they've got some players who can fill those spots, but they've also got real depth issues to the point where they're probably going to be in this position again next year at the very least, unless they start landing big fish in the trade market, which they absolutely have the ability to do. But essentially, they need to get Logan McDonald.
Do you know what? And I was thinking about this the other day. I was just like, why do we need him? Like, if he wants to come back west, hey, there's a team right there. But anyway, that'll be talk for like a mid-season thing, I reckon. We get like a mid-season recap for where everyone's at. But we must move on. We spend more time talking about the Eagles than any other team. I think it's worthwhile though, because, despite the fact that we are both Freo supporters, you don't want to see them languishing this far down, because you still want to see competitive footy.
It's not healthy.
No,
it's not healthy for the sport, and it's not healthy for WA football.
No, not at all. All right, let's bring up the ladder. Ladder's on the screen at the moment. Off you those listening, Giants still sitting on top, 3 wins, 3 losses. Swans also 3 wins, 3 losses behind on percentage. Then you got your Power, Demons, Dockers, Cats, and Blues in that order, sitting on 2 wins apiece. Also the Suns, my apologies. They're rounding out the 8. Then you got the bottom half of the table, Saints on 1-1, as are the Bulldogs and the Bombers. And then our winless teams, which seems to be quite a long list of winless teams for this part of the year. Feels weird. Lions, Crows, Tigers, Magpies, Kangas, Hawks, and the Eagles, all without a win so far this season. Jesse, it's time. It's time for our tips. We're going to have to be rapid fire on our tips tonight. Let's go through them. Our buys, as mentioned earlier, GWS and the Gold Coast Suns. Starting off with Spoon Bowl on Thursday night at the Gabba, Brisbane versus Collingwood. 2 winless teams looking for their first win of the season. What do you reckon, Jesse?
It's got to be Brisbane in Brisbane, doesn't it? But then I think about how bad that Fremantle game was for them, and I think, does it actually have to be Brisbane in Brisbane?
They lost round 1 in Brisbane, or round 0 in Brisbane.
I'm going to go Collingwood.
Ooh.
But I cannot take tipping Collingwood much more after this if they go and lose. So Collingwood, please, just do me this one solid.
Every part of me wants to tip a draw just for the lols, but I am going to.
That would be very funny.
That would be hilarious. I'm going to go Brisbane. We'll differ from the first one straight off the bat. I'm going to go Brisbane by 2 goals. I think it'll be relatively close, but yeah, one of these teams is going to have to bounce back, and I see it being Brisbane. I don't know why, but you know me. That's how I tip. The vibes. All right, let's move briskly along to North versus, I've got Collingwood here. They don't play them. They play Carlton. North versus Carlton, the Friday Good Friday game. Do we have to spend much time on this one?
Carlton should win, but I'm excited to see what North can turn out here.
Yeah, I agree. Carlton and excitement. Also on Good Friday, our last home game in WA for quite some time for Freo. We don't play here again until round 7. Fremantle versus Adelaide at Optus. Are you going to stick with your earlier guns, Jesse? You going to go Adelaide?
you know what? To be a bit of a contrarian, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because I think Adelaide have enough here. In saying that, they do play Western Australia like it's Mars. So that will be interesting to see how they go coming here.
Yeah.
Oh, I backed myself into a corner here. All right, come on, Adelaide.
Oh,
you can do it for the sake of my tipping.
Come on, Freo. No, Freo are going to get up, I think. Again, it's the Fremantle curse. You never know which team's going to rock up. And at the moment, this season, you don't know which team's going to rock up which quarter. It's all just completely different. But I'll stick with Freo. Moving on to Saturday at Marvel, we have Essendon versus St Kilda. I'll go first this time. I think this is the game I was talking about, that I think that if Essendon come out and play the same game style as they did against Sydney, I reckon they could take this. So I'm going to go the Bombers for this one.
Yeah, I actually agree. This was the game I was trying to be a little bit of a hipster in. Alas, it has not worked. Look, Essendon have to play the Marvel merchants at Marvel. That's never easy. But they do, I think, have a more upwards list profile. And if they could do what they did against Sydney, I think they can just create just a little bit of a baby upset here to take out St Kilda.
Little baby upset. Port Adelaide versus Melbourne on Saturday.
This is a game I'm looking forward to.
That's right. Yeah, at Adelaide Oval, probably the match of the round for mine. Port Adelaide versus Melbourne at Adelaide Oval. Jeez, I don't even know, Jesse. I don't know how to go here. What are you going to do?
I'm pretty happy to tip Port. Happy to tip Port. And until I see otherwise with both these teams in terms of where they're at, I'm happy to tip Port.
Yeah, I'm happy to tip Port as well. I think obviously with May out, it's going to be a big loss back there. Probably too strong. Port Adelaide for me as well. The Battle of the West, the Bulldogs versus the Eagles at Marvel on Sunday.
Look, should be the Western Bulldogs, but this is probably one of the 5 games West Coast have circled in their calendar and say, you know what? Maybe.
Yeah, balls to the wall. Let's go. Yeah. Bulldogs. Same as what you've said. Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. Richmond v Sydney at the G on Sunday.
big game for Sydney this because Richmond play the G really well.
They do.
Sticking with Sydney, I think they can go 4-0 here. But I think maybe it's not as wide as the market has it, which is $1.27, $3.78.
Oh, geez,
I think
wow.
it's potentially a shade closer than that.
Yeah, I would have thought so as well. But I think with how Sydney have been putting out performances this year, it'd be hard to tip against them at this point of the season. So I too will go the Swans, and finishing up on Tommy Hawkins' 350th on Easter Monday at the G as well. Hawks versus Geelong. Again, Geelong.
Yeah,
Geelong.
yeah.
Geelong.
Prior to this week's games, I would have said that this is a game that Hawthorn can pinch. I'm not sure they can off what we saw against Melbourne from them, so I'm going with Geelong. But these Easter Monday games always throw up something, so hopefully it's a good game to watch right before we record the podcast, Liam.
That is correct. Now, our tips at the moment stand at 14 apiece, Jesse and I. We've got a few different tips this week, so that will separate. Both of us had a really horrible round with 5.
We've got 2 different tips.
That's more than last week. That's 2 more than last week. We did the exact same thing last week. So, yeah. So 5 apiece last week, not the best of tipping, but that leads us nicely into our final segment of the show, the dodgy punt. Now, Jesse, I haven't run this past you, but here's what I'm thinking we do. I want to get our people, our listeners, a good win. They don't want to hear my stupid nine-leggers anymore. I'm going to put my dodgy punt on a game at some stage on Instagram before a game happens, right? That's where you can find my dodgy punt. I would like you to give the listeners one now that you think will be not dodgy, but has a good shot of getting up for our people. And everyone, as always, gamble responsibly. Jesse, what you got for us?
Well, let's hope this one wins.
Of course.
Given I'm now the only person doing the dodgy punt, and that's been given to me with 0 notice. Port Adelaide to beat Melbourne head-to-head. I think they're a pretty strong side. I think they can manage it. I know I said $1.27 was short for Sydney, but I do think they get the job done at the G. Geelong to beat Hawthorn head-to-head. And my little bit of a Maddie this week, to add a bit of value to the multi, I'm going West Coast to cover the line against the Western Bulldogs. So I'm giving them a 47-point head start.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay.
To defeat the Western Bulldogs. So if West Coast lose by 47 or less, we win. If they win, we also win. Wouldn't that be funny? So that pays about $4.58. Always remember to gamble responsibly. And I will also be providing Liam some multis throughout the weekend as well to pop up on the Dodgy Punts Instagram channel, including we had to do what we did last time and do a live record of a pre-filmed one before the game, do we not?
From the stadium, absolutely. That's why I'll be giving mine.
Is gambling allowed on Good Friday?
Anything's allowed on Good Friday. You can do whatever you want.
I'm going to have a steak while I have a punt. I'm sure that's exactly what the day was meant for.
Footy, beer, steak, gambling. Merry Christmas. All right. So that's going to wrap us up for another episode of the Dodgy Punts podcast. Jesse, you want to take us out, please?
Thank you very much to everyone who has followed the show so far on either YouTube or your preferred podcasting platform. Don't forget to leave us a review, only a 5-star one though. If you leave a 1-star one, I will find you. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already, and we will see you again next Monday for episode number 6 of the Dodgy Punts AFL podcast.
Bye, everybody.